It's time to get started. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. My name is Charity Counts. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Midwest Museums. Welcome to our first ever virtual awards event. This is the first in a series of events we'll be hosting over the coming month, recognizing 5 different awards recipients for 2020. Before we begin today's program, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have historically been and continue to be the stewards of the land we today call the Midwest, long before the existence of the United States of America, and on which all of us in attendance tonight live, work, travel, play, and have built our museums. While we are gathered this afternoon virtually, each of us joins this event from the unceded land of Indigenous peoples. Because many of you are joining us today from Missouri, particularly St. Louis, I invite you to join me in acknowledging the Kickapoo, the Ailani, Mississippian Mound Builders, Osage, Oto Missouria, and Oketi-Shakowee communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. I wish to acknowledge the strength and resilience of these and all Indigenous peoples who have endured and continue to steward the land that I am privileged to call home, and that we are all privileged to call home, in spite of the devastation of their land and lives as a result of colonialism, the misrepresentation of their cultures and heritage across time, including by museums across time, and the ongoing struggle to be recognized in contemporary narratives. In addition to giving our respect for these and all Indigenous peoples and ancestors of this place we call home, consider this acknowledgement a commitment on behalf of AMM to continue to learn more about and to build relationships with the many Indigenous communities and cultural organizations and their communities in the Midwest region. Now, as we begin, I want to offer a few housekeeping notes. We are joined today via Zoom meeting, which means that we can see all of you if you have your video on. We appreciate that, but we also know that you may wish to not have your video on, and that's fine too. Please do keep your audio muted. Only our presenters and award recipients today will be unmuting themselves to speak at different points. Please use the chat feature to post comments and ask questions when we reach Q&A period. I also encourage you to share your reactions on screen. You can use the reactions feature in Zoom, or you can clap and snap your fingers, whatever you want to do to celebrate today. That's fine. Even if we can't hear you, we can see you and are really happy to see that feedback. Before we dive into the program, focus on Missouri Historical, I just want to give a little bit of background on AMM as context for understanding this awards program. AMM was founded in 1927. It's one of the oldest or first known museum associations in the United States. Like other associations, we've been focused on connecting individuals and organizations within our profession and supporting the work of those professionals and institutions through training opportunities, resources, and networking events. This year is the first year we're hosting our awards program virtually. Normally we'd be gathered in person together at a conference somewhere in the Midwest. And of course, our primary focus has been on the Midwest region in terms of the members that we serve, although our members extend far beyond the region as well. We currently call Indianapolis our home, but an interesting fact, tonight's recipient, the Missouri Historical Society, was our headquarters for about 20 years. To say that this year has been challenging is a bit of an understatement. I suppose the bright side of all of this is that we've all been prompted to reach beyond the status quo and try new things. We at AMM, like many of you, have been experimenting with new formats for our programs like this one. And I'm particularly excited about these events. I think when our committee and board and team came together to brainstorm what these events could be this year, we sort of envisioned this opportunity of bringing together the recipients' multiple communities, their local communities and neighbors and family and friends, and their peers and colleagues in the Midwest region. looking around the room already and the list of people who've signed on today and signed up. It's really heartwarming to see all of you who've come today to celebrate with us the work of the Missouri Historical Society. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our presenters and guests this afternoon. Please wave as I introduce you. Joining me from AMM is our board president, Leslie Wright, director of the Grinnell College Museum of Art in Grinnell, Iowa. Also joining us are additional members of the AMM board of directors, and I hope I caught everybody in my list here as I was looking. Whitney Owens, Greg Whitcop, Katie Van Allen, Jennifer Scott, Kate Kaczynski, and Brenda Rainey. I think Cheryl Dar may be on here as well. I haven't tried to keep track of the list. Our guests of honor this evening are representatives from the Missouri Historical Society. I know there are many on this event tonight, or this afternoon, from the Missouri Historical Society, but I want to call attention to a handful of folks. First, Dr. Frances Levine, the president of MHS. Angela Dietz, director of digital initiatives. Lindsay Newton, director of community engagement. Shakia Gillette, director of African American History Initiatives. Jody Sowell, managing director of strategic initiatives. And Madeline Rakemuth, who's been helping to coordinate this event this week. Also joining us is Dan Rael, co-founder of Catalog It, our awards program series sponsor. Catalog It is a powerful, collaborative, cloud-based collections management system. The team at Catalog It, they've been very active members of AMM, and we're very excited, Dan, that you all have decided to support this series. I would ask everyone to join me for a brief round of applause and invite Dan to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much, Charity. So once again, I'm Dan Ryle, one of the founders of Catalog It, and as she mentions, it's a modern and intuitive collections management platform. We're really proud to be sponsoring the AMM Awards program, and I'm just super happy to be here, even virtually as a part of it. I was hoping to be out there, you know, in the Midwest, but it didn't happen this year. So, and I also wanted to congratulate the Silver Lining Award recipient. I mean, the Missouri Historical Society. It's really your efforts to ramp up during the, you know, the early COVID days are really impressive. And I have to admit, I went out to your website and I looked around a little bit, and I got myself completely caught up in your History Happens Here blog posts. And that one, the story of John Wise's 1859 balloon journey, you know, leaving St. Louis, and he carried a lemonade and sandwiches and champagne and brandy and well-cooked fowl, and went off until he actually landed in New York. I mean, the story is just amazing. So once again, congratulations to the Missouri Historical Society. You and your team are just doing an outstanding job of just keeping history really alive and accessible in the middle of these really oddly uncertain times. So thank you very much. Glad to be here. Back to you, Charity.
Thanks, Dan. All right, now for the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time for the awards presentation. To present tonight's award is Leslie Wright.
Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the Association of Midwest Museums, it is my great pleasure to congratulate Dr. Frances Levine and her impressive staff at the Missouri Historical Society for their Silver Lining Award. We created this award this year to honor the amazing work museums are doing in the face of the challenges of this remarkable year. MHS has truly found a silver lining in all that 2020 has thrown at us. Specifically, MHS has taken the challenges of a pandemic and Black Lives Matter and turned it into an asset, finding and inspiring resilience in their community. Through their efforts, they embody the responsiveness and resourcefulness that AMM wants to recognize with this award. I'm excited that we get to see some of their great work in their presentation today. With this award, AMM wants to highlight MHS's ability to use online platforms to cultivate community, taking people out of their isolation bubbles and giving them pride and purpose. From their daily stories in the Uplifting St. Louis campaign and its jaw-dropping 1.47 million impressions online, to the creation of Stories of the Pandemic and STL History Live, the Missouri Historical Society has used the past to energize and inspire the present for a remarkably broad cross-section of their community. Please join me from wherever you are in a round of applause to congratulate the Missouri Historical Society, recipient of the 2020 AMM Silver Lining Award.
Thank you, Leslie. The museum staff have actually pre-recorded remarks to start us off today, which I'll now play prior to opening up to questions as part of the next stage in our program.
Thank you, Leslie Wright and the Association of Midwest Museums Award Selection Committee and the Board of Directors of Midwest Museums Association. The Missouri Historical Society has been active in the St. Louis region since 1866. Collecting for more than 150 years, MHS houses one of the largest collections of artifacts and historical materials of any regional history institution relating to Western expansion in the U.S. Today, we serve the community at 3 locations: the Missouri History Museum in Forest Park, the Library and Research Center, and Soldiers Memorial Military Museum. In a typical year, MHS welcomes around 400,000 visitors to our facilities, but 2020 was not a typical year. Like so many cultural institutions, the COVID-19 pandemic forced us to temporarily close our doors earlier this year. But what did not stop, what did not even pause, was our mission to connect people to their shared past. We launched a daily series of uplifting stories from St. Louis's past, and we shared glimpses of how historians do history at home. We produced video programs and events expanding our online resources. We created a digital archive to collect the history we are currently living through, and we produced a film that showed how resilient St. Louis has been throughout its history. The Missouri Historical Society staff has continued to serve our community in meaningful and measurable ways since the onset of the COVID crisis. I'm so proud of how the NHS team continued our work serving the community, sharing hope through history, and collecting history as it happens, while fostering dialogue around issues of race following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Our team's responsive, proactive, and timely work serves as an example of how historical perspectives remain relevant in even the most challenging times. The digital efforts and virtual programming being recognized this afternoon are the result of the hard work of countless MHS staff members across many departments. Shortly, you will have an opportunity to hear directly from a few of the many staff members who have made our digital efforts and virtual programming possible during shutdown. But before I hand it off to our incredible team, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Missouri Historical Society's members for their generous support. We are so appreciative of our members now and always. I'd like to recognize as well the support of our Board of Trustees, our Zoo Museum, sub-district members, and the Zoo Museum Tax District. Thank you to all of those who support us through your tax contributions. At a moment when St. Louisans are physically disconnected from each other, we believe that St. Louis history is even more important. A sense of community is vital to our mental health and well-being, and I'm proud of how we have helped to spread hope through history during a very difficult and stressful time. It is our honor to serve St. Louis.
Before we share the next round of videos from staff, I just wanted to take a moment for a round of applause for following Dr. Levine's message. We'll now play a series of videos recorded by the key staff that we mentioned earlier.
Hi, I'm Angela Dietz, Director of Digital Initiatives here at the Missouri Historical Society. So as public historians, we know just how critical diaries, letters, and personal stories are to understanding complex historical events. Often these primary sources reveal truths about lived experience in a way that other documents simply can't. Stories of the Pandemic is a digital archive we created to capture these very personal reflections of what it's like to live through the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope that this project will serve as a repository for future historians trying to understand this moment we are all living through right now. Our visitors have been so generous with their contributions. Over 300 stories have been submitted thus far. We've made it pretty simple to contribute. Just visit mohistory.org's History at Home page to find a link to the project. An easy-to-use web form allows you to write your story, and if you have a photo or a video file that helps illustrate that story, we'd love to have that as well. So whether you tell us about your wedding that had to be reimagined or scaled back, how your kids are dealing with social distancing, wearing masks, closed playgrounds, and remote schooling, or the creative ways you're staying connected with family and friends during this difficult time, we want to hear your story.
I'm Lindsay Newton, Director of Community Engagement here at the Missouri Historical Society. This spring, when social distancing measures in response to COVID-19 were put in place and our buildings were temporarily closed, we knew we needed to find ways to engage our community. We wanted to make learning about our shared history accessible to the public, even while everyone was staying home. The series STL History Live was designed to bring fascinating stories about St. Louis directly into homes via the video conferencing app Zoom, offering St. Louisans a way to engage with our curators, public historians, and educators, as well as regional and national scholars, activists, authors, and thought leaders. STL History Live programs are presentations followed by opportunities for the audience to ask questions. The programs shine a light on the diverse history of our region and tie it to our collections and contemporary issues. In this series, we have explored pandemics of the past. We have talked about contributions of Hispanic military service members. We offered a look at the smallest objects in our collections. We have discussed the environmental history of the Mississippi River and the present efforts to care for the fresh waters that our region relies on. We heard from a woman who witnessed the aftermath of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima when she was 14 years old. And in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, we have engaged in dialogue with women artists, nonprofit leaders, and business owners about their roles as grassroots changemakers in our community. In the past 6 months, nearly 5,000 households have tuned in live to over 120 virtual programs. STL History Live has provided a needed sense of community in a virtual space where we can come together and find connections to the past even when we cannot be connected in the same room.
Greetings. My name is Shakia Gillette, and I'm the director of the African American History Initiative at the Missouri Historical Society. This past summer, we created a 6-week programmatic series titled How Did We Get Here? Conversations about Race, Anti-Blackness, and Identity. Using the murder of George Floyd as the entry point, this series put history at the center of our conversations and gave our audience tools to get a better understanding of how we arrived at this current moment in our nation's history. How Did We Get Here was created with a 4-tiered approach to engage our audience on various levels. The first tier was our youth activism workshops, which helped to activate the voices of our younger guests. The second tier focused on dismantling racism and included a keynote presentation from Dr. Crystal Fleming, author of How to Be Less Stupid About Race. The third tier focused on regional specific topics, such as the local history of policing and the erasure of Black neighborhoods. The final tier gave our participants a safe space to process and heal from the information that they heard during the keynote presentations. Overall, the series welcomed well over 600 participants. In response to the series, one of the participants stated, "I still have a lot of work to do to dismantle white supremacy, but I now have some paths." It was an absolute joy to quickly respond to the needs of our community through this series, and we hope that our viewers feel the same way. A huge thank you to the Association of Midwest Museums for selecting us for this award.
Hello, my name is Jody Sowell. I am Managing Director of Strategic Initiatives here at the Missouri Historical Society. One of the things I'm proudest of about our work during the pandemic shutdown is that we haven't just been trying to connect people to the past, but we've also been trying to connect them to one another, connect them to this community, and help them to connect the past to the present and future. Two projects that I think did that particularly well are Uplifting STL and St. Louis Strong. Uplifting STL was a daily social media series where we shared one good story from St. Louis's past every day. The idea being that people were hearing so much bad news, so much hard news about what was happening in society today, that we wanted to give them a little moment of inspiration, a heartwarming story, or something that was just fun. So we told stories of a civil rights activist during the 1870s who would literally jump into the streets, grab the reins of horse-pulled trolleys, and make them stop if he thought that they were going to pass by African-American passengers. We told the story of a woman who dealt with the suicide of her husband by writing one of the most influential books of all time, a book that is probably on your kitchen shelves. And we talked about an all St. Louis World Series. All of these were just moments to give people a little bit of joy in dark times. And our audiences responded. They told us how much these stories meant to them. They told us that they often left them with tears in their eyes or hope in their heart. And they told us that they came to this series each and every day looking for that little moment of uplift. The other project I mentioned is St. Louis Strong. In this 3.5-minute video, we talk about challenges that St. Louis has faced as a community in the past and how they overcame those challenges, proving that even in today's tough times, St. Louis as a community will not just survive, but will thrive. Rather than telling you too much about that video, I thought it'd be easier just to show you. So ladies and gentlemen, St. Louis Strong.
What does it look like to live through history? In St. Louis in 2020, it looks like the view out a living room window, online meetings and empty streets, and worry about everything from toilet paper to paychecks. When COVID-19 hit the world, this country, and our community, we were ordered to stay home and to stay away from one another. The best thing we could do was to distance ourselves. But something special is happening in St. Louis. Even as we are told to stay apart, St. Louisans are finding ways to unite. We're ordering takeout to support local restaurants. We're creating socially distanced scavenger hunts and agreeing to foster pets. We're dancing on our porches to show support for healthcare workers. And we're chalking sidewalk messages, hoping neighbors will find a little bit of encouragement as they seek some fresh air. It shouldn't surprise us that St. Louis is finding ways to come together even as we are kept apart. St. Louis has always found ways to stay strong in tough times. And if COVID-19 thinks it has us on the ropes, it better think again. Throughout its history, St. Louis has often been bruised, but it has never been beaten. In 1849, St. Louisans band together to extinguish a fire that threatened to destroy the city, all while fighting a cholera epidemic that was ravaging the world. When a worldwide flu struck in 1918, St. Louis was the city that first showed how to flatten the curve. Tornadoes touched down in 1896, 1927, and 1959. And every time, St. Louisans answered the call to rebuild. In 1940, after St. Louis suffered through pollution so thick it literally blacked out the sun, we came together to brighten the city's skies. And in 1993, we collectively did battle with the mighty Mississippi. We will undoubtedly leave this latest fight with some scars. But if anyone thinks this will defeat us, well, they just don't know St. Louis. We are a community built on a rich history. We are a community that understands you don't have to be perfect to be proud. We are a community that knows it takes more than 6 feet to keep us apart. We are St. Louis. Strong today, even stronger tomorrow.
I don't know about you all, but I want that band to follow me around all day. What a wonderful presentation. Thank you for recording those great videos and an overview of all of the wonderful work of the museum this year. I would now like to open this program up for questions from members of our audience, whether you're members of the museum community in the Midwest or friends of the museum. If there are questions that you have, please post them in the chat, and we'll have the right people answer those questions. While we're waiting, one more round of applause for the Missouri Historical Society. Well, I've got one question I'll start us off with. How many people did it take to put that video together?
So it took a lot. It took a whole community, and it took our staff. So you saw, one thing we wanted to capture was photos of what people were doing today to respond to the pandemic. And so a call went out to our staff to get those. My wife bothered a lot of people to make sure that they would send photos. The MHS family is big and strong, and we find our resources where we can get them. So, amazingly, all of that video work was done by our one videographer. And so pretty amazing testament to his skill. And we created that video, I think, in a matter of weeks. It helped that, of course, we had those archival photos. We had some of the photos from the Stories of the Pandemic collecting initiative that Angie talked about. And so it came from everywhere and sort of every corner of the community.
I think you'd literally have to say it took the whole village to produce it. And the team is pretty remarkable. Somebody asked what our attendance is like. And, we reopened on June 20th. We closed March 16th. We reopened on June 20th. And, our attendance is running maybe 15 to 20% of normal. But one of the things about us is for the last 6 years, we have largely been attendance free. So we are free to all members of the community. We are free to all the tourists who visit. And what we found when we opened is that people were ready. They're ready to come back in. The numbers are small, but the people who come into our exhibits are grateful. All of our programming we've kept online. And the team who put together that film has also been doing remarkable programming as well.
Is it the same team that's been producing the daily posts? Is it a different team, and how big is that team? Go in with one of the questions in the chat.
I'm going to ask Lee or probably Lee or Jody to answer that because they'll know. Comes from sort of all over the museum.
Jody, I was waiting for you to jump in.
I was nodding for you to jump in. That was my lead.
We need to have like a Zoom signal. Well, I should let Jody say it because he really gathered all of the uplifting SDL stories, but he worked with his team and historians, as well as those in the library and the collection side. So really anyone could submit, and we created a great content calendar and just kept it going. It was really a fun project. And as Jody said before, it was great to see how everyone really jumped in. It was exciting.
So speaking of, I'm jumping around a little bit with the questions in the chat here just to see what connects, but speaking of the teams that came together to make this happen, the village, one person posted, there are many different parts of the project. Can you talk about your process of working together across your institution and with the community, I would say? Anyone want to take that?
I think I'm going to ask Lindsay to talk a little bit about our, and Shakia, to talk about how we work across the community. And, you know, one thing I have to say is this didn't all come together just because of pandemic. We've been working across the community. That's very much in our DNA. But let me ask Lindsay and Shakia to add to that answer.
Thanks, Fran. As far as like our programming series, the virtual programs that we're offering, again, that's something that, I mean, so many people across our institution are all coming together on, and I see so many of your faces here now. There's about 6 of us who really learned the ins and outs of Zoom webinar and kind of host the programs and build the calendars around them. But I mean, countless members of our, like our curators are doing it, our educators, our guests presenting, even our chief preparator presented on the Blues Stanley Cup win this past Tuesday. So people from our archives, our librarians, really all of our staff are coming and presenting in our STL History Live, our virtual programs. We've also got some of our educators leading homeschool days and storytelling sessions for families. But then, as Fran said, like our community collaborations, we have such strong relationships with so many organizations around town that do work in a variety of ways, and we've been keeping in touch with what's going on. Sometimes that means we just set up a call, a Zoom, a phone call, and hear what their organization is doing during the pandemic and see if there's things we can do with each other. And so sometimes we join them on their platforms, and sometimes they're able to join us on our platforms. And virtual programming also has a huge benefit in that we've managed to bring in speakers, presenters who are not local. While everyone is at home, we can certainly work with people. Last night, there was someone who was presenting from the Dominican Republic on women business owners in St. Louis. So it's really wonderful to stay connected with so much of our community. Shakia, I'll let you add to that too.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I think the best way to describe that is, I hear a weird echo. Am I the only one who hears the echo? Okay, there it is.
It's echoing.
It's still echoing?
Now you're good.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is this better? Okay, great. Okay, so I guess the best way to sum up the community participation, specifically for the How Did We Get Here series, is once you establish those connections, it's much easier for you to approach them when you're in a crunch. How did we get here? We really had to pull that together in less than 4 weeks. So we had to reach out to people and
one of the local historians in our community, Dr. John Wright, I mean, I gave him a call and he was all in to talk about the erasure of Black neighborhoods and the importance of Black neighborhoods. So just continuing those connections and making sure that we are keeping in contact with the people that we reach out to, you know, throughout the year.
I'd also add to that organizations in town reach out to us. And I think one part of it is we have 3 spectacular locations. The History Museum in Forest Park, Soldiers Memorial Military Building, and our library and archive. And we're out in the community. We all stay connected with different organizations, different community partners. So when the symphony was looking, even at the last minute, to relocate one of their pop-up symphonies, they came to us. And in less than 24 hours, we were set up to work with them because our staff is great at pivoting. They're great at communicating with each other, and people know that they can come in. And if we say yes, we're all in. We're all in as a team. We can't do everything, but when we say we're in, we're in.
Great, thank you. I don't know if this maybe is a question for Shakia or Shakia and Jody. Can you talk a little bit about how you pivoted your message of uplift this year after George Floyd's murder? Or did you keep it at all? Shakia, do you want to start? Or Jody?
I can start and Shakia can build on. So, you know, we did the Uplifting STL series was a daily social media series. So every day you got an uplifting story from St. Louis's past. When the murder of George Floyd happened, we paused that series and said that this no longer felt like the right messaging during this time. And that was a time where we started to focus much more on African-American history written by African-American authors on our social media series and blog posts. Although I will say, during the Uplifting STL series, a lot of those posts were also about African-American history. But it was a decision about tone, and that tone didn't feel quite right after the country was wrestling with this incredibly dark moment in our history. And so while people were turning to us during the pandemic for those uplifting stories, it felt like they were turning to us for something different after the murder of George Floyd. And that's where Shakia's efforts really came in, because she recognized what sort of forums they needed. And so we really shifted to that.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. When we did that pause, it was really important to understand the community that we serve and to understand that this is re-traumatizing for the St. Louis community, especially, you know, with the murder of Michael Brown. So we wanted to make sure that the approach for how did we get here was sincere, that it had integrity, and that it was really thoughtful. So that's why we created that 4-tiered approach, to make sure that we built in spaces to not only talk about the root causes and the history that kind of got us here, but to also allow for spaces to process, to heal, so people could, you know, come together and kind of talk about those. And to lead those specific conversations, we actually contracted with Undue Bias. They are a consulting firm, and they came in and they really helped us to kind of navigate some of those difficult conversations and made sure that everyone had a space. We broke up into caucusing spaces specifically for those healing conversations that we had, and people who identified as Black and people who identified as white would be split up into groups, and they were able to process and heal together.
And Shakia, this is all virtually, right? This programming all took place in a virtual space.
Correct, yes.
Were there any particular challenges with, you know, building trust and making these connections virtually?
Oh, most definitely. I think at the very beginning, people were very hesitant to participate in the caucusing spaces specifically. But by the end of the series, we knew each other's faces. people were constantly coming back, and I think we were able to break down some of those barriers. And we actually spent maybe 15 minutes all together. We would spend about 5-10 minutes together in the beginning, then we would break up in the caucusing spaces, and then we would come together at the end. So it really did create a bond for the people that continuously came back.
Great. So a couple other questions in the chat. Of course, I welcome anybody who is out there to please feel free to post others. We've still got a little bit of time for questions. One comment is these initiatives are terrific. How did MHM decide that this was the right set of programs to do at this time among all the options you could have chosen? And what was that decision and prioritization process like?
You know, I think at the beginning of pandemic, our leadership team came together, I think, every single day, virtually, online, and we talked about, and one of the things that we wanted to do in making this quick pivot was to also see what content we had that could be repurposed, what were some blogs that we could roll out again. But I think a lot of it came from our staff that I would say has they're really in touch with the community. And we looked internally at what were our exhibits, what were our cultural assets, what were the resources that we had internally to work with. And so we repurposed some things, we created some new things. And I think one of the questions that somebody asked was, how did you find people who are willing to do content? We probably had more people who offered to do content than we necessarily had the number of programs. And I think, again, that comes from having a staff that has a tremendous range and skill set, and that also, I think they got just as caught up in the positive feelings of those. We did a series called Historians at Home, and that was a really fun series that connected our staff with our resources to the community. One of our staff members showing how she was doing homeschooling with her kids, the struggle she was having with math and science, but boy, could she help them with social studies and history. Another staff member using historic cookbooks to create some historic recipes. Another using the idea of a victory garden, one of our preparators, and building a victory garden. Another one of our staff members, a conservator, showing people how to conserve photographs at home. So I think, some of the discussion came from what do we have that we can use quickly, and what's out there, and what are some things that connect us to our collections, our community, and our deep history in St. Louis.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Were you managing through a budget crisis due to shutting down as well, or was your budget relatively stable during this time, during the spring and summer, we'll say, as you launched these programs?
I don't think anything's stable. I don't think anything's stable day to day. Now, we are very lucky in the Historical Society to have the Zoo Museum District, the Zoo Museum Subdistrict tax funding, and that tax funding is always there as our base. But we had to do so much we've been holding all of our vacant positions. We have canceled all travel. So we have an outstanding financial management team as well. I know our CFO is on the call today, and our CFO and our senior leadership team, they are an incredible team that come together to look at what can we do. I'm very proud of the fact that we never furloughed any staff. We never had to, no one went without pay. But we held everyone, and we're still holding. We're just beginning to release some of the holds on staff positions. So we did it with very skillful and attention to the details of our budget.
Thank you. What did you do to keep connected with your donors and members? Was it newsletters, specialized Zoom meetings? Were they attending all these wonderful programs?
I'm going to answer some of that, and then I'm going to ask Lee and Jody. I mean, we did a couple things. First, for our staff, we started doing a weekly staff letter that went out Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of every week, depending on what we wanted to link people to. We also sent it to the board. I mean, we spoke with our executive committee and our board chair as often as needed. We invited our board. We have a large board and a large tax district board. So we have a lot of people to keep in the loop. And we used our newsletters that we sent out. We sent them invitations to all of our programs. Lindsay might be able to tell you, or someone else, how many of them actually came, but whether they came or not, they knew we were doing it. And I think that we had tremendous reaction locally to St. Louis Strong, and probably Jody and Lee can talk about the response to that.
Many of our members do log in regularly for our public virtual programming, which is really exciting to see. Go ahead, Lee. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I could say that. And actually, I just got some official data from Senate on that about half of the people who come to our programs are members. So, but as far as keeping regular contact with them, obviously they were coming to the programs, but we increased during the time of closure up until about mid-June, we significantly increased our e-newsletters. So there was a weekly events e-news that went out to our entire list. And then there was a membership e-news that went just to members weekly. And so they were getting a few things. And then we introduced something new that we've retained even now, what we call history delivery, and it goes to members and then anyone else who signs up for it. But the two stories from our blog emailed right to your inbox, the latest stories once a week. And that was, I think, it was enormously successful during closure, and it continues to be. I think we've got about a 40% open rate on that e-news. So even now, our members are reading those stories that Dan was talking about that he liked so much every week. So it's really exciting.
That's awesome. So this question maybe, for all of you, as you think about the programs of this year and you're experimenting with different formats and Zoom programming especially, what or how will you carry any of that forward when you start doing in-person programming again?
I'm going to throw that to Shakia and Lindsay because they'll be doing most of our in-person programming when we start up again. And maybe Angie, you live in a digital universe, but there may be some things that you're going to continue.
I think we're looking at a transition period and hybrid options. We realize that it's just convenient to be able to log on for a program at 11 a.m. lunch break time, and you might not be able to drive to our building just logistically without the pandemic. So some people were offering us feedback about that right off the bat. And so I think always having some virtual options, even when we are able to gather regularly on site, will be something that we do. And in addition to doing only virtual programs, we might do some that we broadcast. We stream live programs. And especially when we look at, when we first start coming back for programming in our spaces, our physical spaces, we might have to limit the number for safety. And we have an awesome production team that's really learned how to do some really new cool things. We can use multiple spaces in our museum to stream from one space to the other. And then also we can send that stream to a virtual platform for people to watch something that's happening in one of our buildings while they're at home. So I'm really excited that we have learned new skills during this and will continue to use them.
The one thing that I know for certain that we will continue doing is some type of healing spaces. We were already in the process of trying to build in spaces for our on-site programs, but now that we saw that it was extremely successful through the How Did We Get Here series, that's something that we're definitely going to continue. But it's just a matter of figuring out when to do it. I think the way it was positioned in the series was, perfect. It's just a matter of figuring out how that will fit, kind of going forward.
And I'll say about the Stories of the Pandemic, we started that project when we weren't able to meet with donors in person because we didn't want to miss out on the stories that would be coming from this particular moment in time. But we will probably leave the digital archive up, even though now we're able to meet with donors in some restricted capacity. And so we are asking for physical donations related to the pandemic at this point. But I'm sure that over the next year or however long this stretches out, there will be more stories to tell. So we will be leaving that archive up for a while.
Great. Well, to wrap up Q&A today, I would like to hear from each of you. As you reflect on the year and the events this year and these programs that you've created, and you could do it all over again, what would you do differently? Is there anything that you would change? And I'd love to hear from each of you. So whoever would like to go first.
Jody.
I don't know if there's anything that I would change. As much as we did, and you can see how much we did, I always want to do more. I didn't think that there was a chance of being prouder of this community or prouder of this historical society. And during these months, I found myself prouder than I've ever been of both. And it's incredibly important to me and to all of us that we serve this community. And so I think truly, I wish we could do even more. And if we could find a way without the people on screen getting even less sleep than they've gotten in the last few months, then we would do it. But yeah, that's my answer. I will pitch to Shakia.
Oh man, I don't know what I would do differently. Kind of echoing Jody's sentiments. I mean, if we had more time building up to some of the programs, that would be great. Time is always what gets us in the end. But I was extremely proud of the outcome and how everyone just came together. The African American History Initiative is a department of one. So this was really a collective effort to pull this off. So yeah, I guess that's the best way that I could put it. So I'll pitch it to Angie.
Well, I will echo that same sentiment. Contributors have been really generous and they've given us some wonderful stories to work with. We have only been able to share a portion of those just because of timing and many other things that are sort of going on. So I think, over the next year or so, I would be really excited to get more of that content out. And Madeline has been my great partner in making sure that we are sharing the stories that we can. But as I mentioned in the video, we have over 300 at this point. So there's a lot more to share, and I think we're excited about doing that moving forward. And I'll pitch it to Lindsay.
Gosh, I really cannot think of anything new to say other than I think when the pandemic started and we were sent home, we all sort of had this sense of like urgency. And then the pandemic just kept going and going. So it is important to pace ourselves and to focus on like self-care and connecting as a staff, which I think we do, but there's always room to do more because we are only seeing each other in Zoom or Teams meetings most of the time. And I think that's something we should keep continuing to work on, is connecting and supporting each other and make sure that we're in it for the long haul, so that we're doing what we can to stay in it with just as much energy as when we started. But everything has really been outstanding, and it's a lot of good energy.
you. Dr. Levine? Oh, I think you're muted. There you go.
They're going to make me cry. They're it's an amazing team. You know, at the beginning, I said, how are we going to sustain this for this 2 or 3 months? And here we are, almost 8 months into it. And this team is remarkable. If I had known at the beginning that we would be in it this long, I don't think I would have thought we could sustain it. But I think we've adjusted the pace a little bit. We've attenuated some things. I think that we've been all really aware of self-care. I am going to cry. So I just couldn't be luckier to work with a team and to work with a history that connects so deeply. And that is right now what I'm seeing is people connecting with history in ways they may never have done before. We have a new relevance, and I think this team deserves every recognition for what they have done to serve our community during this unprecedented time. So thank you to the Alliance for doing this, or for the Association of Midwestern Museums, excuse me. Thank you so much for this award, for recognizing this amazing team. They even know how to pitch to each other in Zooms. I hope you noticed that as well.
I don't know that there's any better closing than the words that you just shared, Dr. Levine. I think that on behalf of AMM, the board, and our committee for the awards program, we all felt those same feelings reading through all that you had done. I know that I have said since I saw a nomination come in for you that I've been watching what you were doing all year, forwarding it to members and everything, just because of it being such wonderful programming. And I do think you have so much to be proud of. And we are proud to call you one of our own. Well, I'm gonna, say that's it for Q&A today. I'd like to just say once again, congratulations. And we're all so happy to be here with you today and wish you the very best the rest of fall and going into the winter months. Please, one more round of applause, everyone, for the Missouri Historical Society and their team and all of their wonderful programs this year. Thank you so much for being here. I hope to see many of you at our upcoming awards events for other recipients, and wish you the absolute best. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.